All right, let's dive in. Ever heard of the Celts? I bet you have. But how much do you really know about them?
Well, they're more than just those cool knot designs you see everywhere, that's for sure.
For real. We're talking ancient Europe, think before countries as we know them. Picture fierce warriors, powerful nature gods, intricate art woven into everyday life.
And what's fascinating is that their legacy is still so strong today, even after facing off against empires like Rome. I mean, think about it. They still show up in art, in fantasy, even some modern spiritual practices.
Absolutely. So, ready to time travel back to 800 BC, we're going to really grasp what Celtic culture was all about thanks to this insightful article. It's going to be epic.
Epic is right. But before we go full on Braveheart, we got to answer some basics, like who were these people? Where did they even come from?
Right. It's easy to just say Celts, but it was more complicated than that.
Yeah, it wasn't like one big Celtic nation with borders and all that. Could think more like a massive network of tribes. They stretched all across Europe.
Wow, so how'd they stay connected over such huge distances?
What linked them was their shared culture, their artistic styles, their beliefs. They even had a common language. By 800 BC, their reach was mind-blowing, from the British Isles all the way to parts of modern-day Turkey. Get this. There's even evidence they traded with China.
Hold up, China. That's serious globalization way before its time. I mean, I'm impressed they kept their culture so cohesive over those distances. I'd think there'd be Celtic dialects popping up everywhere.
Right, it shows you how effective their communication and trade network must have been. But this decentralized structure, well, it had a downside too. It made them vulnerable, especially when facing Utopian empires. They had strength in their culture, but not the political unity to resist a force like Rome.
Ah, so double-edged sword, that interconnectedness. But let's talk about something else the Celts are famous for. Their warrior culture, it's legendary.
Oh, absolutely. The Celts were renowned for their bravery and their military skill. Imagine warriors decked out in this intricate armor, wielding beautifully crafted weapons, swords, spears, chariots, the works. Their society really prized courage in battle, and let me tell you, their reputation as fighters spread far and wide.
No wonder they're the inspiration for so many fantasy stories. Speaking of legendary warriors, I gotta ask about Boudica. She's like the ultimate symbol of Celtic resistance.
She's a perfect example. Boudica was this warrior queen. She led a rebellion against Roman rule in Britain around 60 AD. Now, her uprising was crushed, but her story really shows you something crucial. The Celts and the Romans had different approaches to war. The Romans were masters of strategy and logistics. The Celts, they were known for individual bravery. They struggled to unite and coordinate their forces effectively.
So Boudica, fierce but ultimately outmaneuvered, makes you wonder what if? What if the Celtic tribes had been more unified, right? But the Celts weren't all about fighting. Their mythology is full of these captivating stories and bangs.
Oh, for sure. Celtic mythology, it's incredibly rich. Gods, goddesses, mystical creatures, and it all reflects this deep connection to nature, to the cycles of life and death. These stories, they weren't just entertainment. They were how the Celts understood the world, the cosmos, even the human experience.
Okay, so who are the A-listers in this Celtic pantheon? Who should we know about?
Well, you can't talk Celtic deities without mentioning the Dagda. He's often seen as the good god, or even the big daddy god. He's all about abundance, fertility, strength. He's got this magical club that can slay enemies and bring the dead back to life.
That's some serious power.
Oh, yeah. Then you've got Lu. He's associated with light, skill, mastery, and all sorts of crafts and arts. He embodies achieving excellence in different disciplines, which I'm sure a lot of people today can relate to.
It's like the ancient Celtic version of the Renaissance man. Okay, what about goddesses? Any fierce females in the mix?
Brigid is a major figure. She's a triple goddess representing healing, poetry, and smithcraft. She's all about creativity and the interconnectedness of life. What's interesting is that she later got absorbed into Christian traditions as Saint Brigid. It shows that cultural exchange isn't always about erasing the old. Sometimes it's about blending, about adaptation.
That's such a good point. Cultural evolution in action. But we can't forget about the mystical creatures, right? The banshee, for example. That's straight up nightmare fuel.
Oh, definitely. The banshee, with her mournful wail that means death is coming, still sends chills down your spine, right? Then you've got the Selkies, shape-shifting creatures that can shed their seal skins and take on human form. It's this cool blend of animal and human nature. And of course, you can't forget the Fomorians. Chaotic, monstrous beings. They represent disorder, darkness, all those primal fears.
I love how these creatures tap into these universal themes. Our fascination with transformation, our fear of the unknown. But to really understand Celtic spirituality, we gotta talk about the Druids, right? They were more than just priests.
Oh, way more. The Druids, they were philosophers, advisors, healers, keepers of knowledge. They were like intermediaries between the physical and the spiritual. They held tons of authority in Celtic society.
And the article mentioned the oak tree as being super symbolic for them. What's the deal with that?
The Celts saw the oak as a symbol of strength, wisdom, endurance, qualities they associated with the Druids themselves. A lot of Druidic rituals were held in oak groves, sacred groves. The oak's connection to the other world, it was central to their beliefs. It's fascinating, right? This ancient reverence for nature, it connects to how we think today about the environment, about preserving our forests.
So it's not just spiritual guidance, it's that deep connection to nature, something that's still relevant to tons of people today. Speaking of connection, let's get back to the Celts and their relationships with other cultures. We've talked warriors, we've talked tribes, how they do against the Roman Empire. That must have been a clash of titans.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And to understand this clash, we got to dig deeper into Celtic society. Remember those 44 tribes we mentioned? Well, that number, it's from a specific point in time, around the 1st century BC. It shows you how decentralized they were. It worked well for them in a lot of ways, but it became a problem when they faced a centralized power like Rome.
So even with their warrior culture, that lack of unity was a major disadvantage. United we stand, divided we fall, right?
Exactly. And this theme of internal division, it pops up all the time in history, even today. It reminds us how important unity is when you're facing threats. But we also got to remember, the Celts' lack of unity, it wasn't because they were weak or cowardly. It came from their culture, their social structure, a system with its own strengths and weaknesses.
So there's more to their story than just brave warriors versus organized Romans. I'm already seeing the Celts in a new light. But speaking of leaving a mark, let's talk Celtic art. It's more than just those knot designs we see everywhere, right?
Oh, so much more. Celtic art, it's known for its intricate geometry, those interwoven patterns, those stylized animal forms, those swirling spirals, knots, interlaced designs. It wasn't just decoration. It was full of meaning, reflecting their worldview, their spiritual beliefs.
They're like each pattern tells a story.
Exactly. Take the Celtic knot. That never-ending loop, it represents eternity, how everything's connected, the cyclical nature of time. Such a simple design, but it speaks to such a profound concept.
And then there's that three-arm spiral symbol I've seen, the triskel, right?
Another great example, the triskel. It's found all over Celtic art, and those three arms, they can symbolize different triads, like life, death, and rebirth, or the three realms, earth, sea, and sky. It shows how much the Celts valued balance, interconnectedness, that cyclical view of existence.
Wow, so much depth in those designs. You really start to appreciate the thought and symbolism behind their art. And it wasn't just visual, right? Music and storytelling were huge for them, too.
Absolutely. For the Celts, music and storytelling, they weren't just entertainment. They were crucial for preserving their history, their traditions, their values. They had bards, professional storytellers, musicians who travel around reciting poems, singing ballads, keeping their culture alive.
Imagine hearing those stories gathered around a fire, passed down through generations like a living history book.
It was. And these oral traditions, they were incredibly resilient. Even with conquests and cultural shifts, the Celts' stories, their songs, they survived, and they shaped the culture of Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Brittany for centuries to come. It just shows you the power of oral tradition.
It makes you realize how important stories are. They can outlast empires, transcend time.
Absolutely. And when you look at the impact of Celtic culture, it's clear their story isn't just about ancient battles or mythical creatures. It's about the power of language, art, storytelling to shape our world. But there's still so much more to explore. Their influence goes way beyond what we've covered so far.
Okay, I'm ready for more. What other Celtic surprises are in store?
So those 44 Celtic tribes we talked about, well, going up against the Romans, that really tested their way of doing things. You know, that decentralized structure.
Yeah, that lack of unity kept coming up. So where'd that really show itself?
The Battle of Alesia, 52 BC. That's where it all went down. Vercingetorix, he was a Gallic chieftain. He'd managed to unite several tribes, and he went head-to-head with Julius Caesar himself.
Whoa, so Vercingetorix was trying to create that united front the Celts have been missing, huh? What made him different?
I think he saw what was happening. He realized that to have a chance against Rome, the tribes had to put aside their differences. It was a bold move, and you know what? For a while, it seemed like it might actually work.
He sounds like a pretty sharp leader. So how'd this epic showdown play out?
It was brutal. A siege lasted for weeks. Caesar's legions, they surrounded Alesia completely, cut off supplies, reinforcements, the whole deal. Vercingetorix and his warriors, they fought bravely, but in the end, they were outnumbered, outmaneuvered. That Roman strategy was tough to beat.
So even united, the Celts couldn't overcome the Romans. Was that it? The end for them?
It was a huge factor, for sure. But here's something interesting. Even in defeat, the Celts earned something, the respect of their enemies. Roman accounts of the battle, even Caesar's own writings, they talk about the courage of the Celtic warriors, how fierce they were.
So they may have lost the battle, but they won admiration. That's pretty powerful. But the Celts didn't just disappear, right? Their story goes way beyond battles.
Exactly. It's time to talk about their artistic legacy. Remember those intricate knots, those spirals? That's just the beginning.
I'm ready. I always loved those patterns, but I never thought about the meaning behind them.
That's what's so cool about Celtic art. It's not just beautiful, it's packed with symbolism.
Mm.
All those complex designs, the interwoven patterns, the animal forms, it reflects their whole worldview.
Like their art is a window into their soul.
You could say that. Like the Celtic knot, that continuous loop. It's not just pretty. It symbolizes eternity, how everything's connected, the cyclical nature of time. It's amazing, right? Such a simple idea conveyed so powerfully.
I get it. It's like their art is communicating with us across time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's the triskel, that three-armed spiral. You see it everywhere in Celtic art. And those three arms, they can symbolize different things. Three realms, earth, sea, sky, or life, death, rebirth. It shows how the Celts saw everything as connected, part of this bigger cosmic dance.
I'm noticing those designs everywhere now, like hidden messages.
They are. And beyond those symbols, don't forget music, storytelling. Those were huge for the Celts. Not just entertainment. They were how they preserved their history, their traditions.
Yeah, it was their oral history, right? Passed down through generations.
Exactly. They had bards, professional storytellers, musicians. They'd travel around reciting poems, singing ballads, keeping their culture alive. It was like a living library, full of stories and myths that connected them to their past.
I bet those gatherings were amazing. To hear those stories firsthand, passed down like that, must have been powerful.
It was how they kept their culture strong. Even when things were changing, their stories survived. Think about it. They didn't have written language the way we do, but their stories, they made it. And not just survived, they thrived, shaped the cultures of Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Brittany. It shows you how strong oral tradition can be.
That's true. Stories have power. They can outlast empires.
They do. And when you look at Celtic culture's impact, it's clear their story isn't just ancient history. It's about how language, art, storytelling can shape the world. But we're not done yet. There's more to explore. Their influence goes even further.
Okay, I'm hooked. What else is there? Okay, so we've gone back in time. We've talked battles and myths. We've even decoded some of those awesome Celtic symbols. What else is there to discover about these people?
You know, their influence, it goes beyond art and stories. It's even in languages spoken today.
Really? Like what languages?
Well, think about it. Irish, Scottish Gaelic, Welsh, Breton, they all have roots in those old Celtic tongues.
Wow, so when I hear those languages, it's like echoes of those ancient Celts. That's incredible.
It is. And it's not just the words themselves, it's how those cultures tell stories, their humor, even their connection to nature. You can trace those threads way back.
So like when I'm reading Irish myths or listening to Welsh music, I'm tapping into something ancient.
You got it. It's all connected. And remember how we talked about the Celts' reverence for nature? Their beliefs about cycles of life? Well, those ideas, they've found their way into some modern spiritual practices.
Oh yeah, like all those Celtic tattoos and jewelry you see.
That's part of it. But I'm talking about something deeper. Think about modern paganism, some New Age beliefs. They've taken a lot from those old Celtic ways of thinking, honoring nature, the divine feminine, cycles of life and death.
So even though the Celts, as a distinct culture, might be gone, their ways of seeing the world are still alive.
Exactly. And I think that tells us something about humans. You know, we're always looking for meaning, connection, something bigger than ourselves. And the Celts, with their nature connection, their myths, their art, they give us this different way to see things, a way that still speaks to people today.
Yeah, I'm starting to see them less as figures from the past and more like inspiration for now. Their story shows us that even though cultures change, certain values, they can stick around.
I like that. And I think that's a great takeaway from our deep dive. It's not just about history. It's about realizing the human spirit, you know. We create, we adapt, we leave our mark on the world.
Well said. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling inspired. It makes me want to keep learning.
That's the best part. There's always more to uncover. And the more we understand the past, the more we understand ourselves.
That's so true. Thanks for joining me on this Celtic journey.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.